Thank you so very much for coming back after dinner. We're going to go ahead and get started with the last bit of programming we've got for the day. We have a fire. No. I was told no fires. We can't build fires. A space heat. Maybe that would be a Cami question for out in the hall. We have Jessica and Alice. And these were the two on the commission that I'd mentioned that we would teleconference in, and we actually have another member of the commission that is here as well. I will let her. I don't know. She doesn't know I'm doing this. You want to tell them who you are and where you serve?
I'm Majita Machinga from Zimbabwe, and I was representing Africa on the commission.
So she's also going to help us with answer some of the questions that you have. You'll see on the bottom of the screen, text your questions to. If you have questions that you would like them to see and respond to as best they can, you can send those questions to this text number. This is not either one of their cell phone numbers. So feel free to text anything you want, your hopes and dreams. And no, but this number will send the questions to Alice and Jessica. So they will both get any question that you text to this number. Is that clear enough? Are we good? Okay, great. On the screen that's me. There we go. All right. They look so much better than I do. This is Alice Williams. She's serving in Florida, and Jessica LeGrone, she's serving in Kentucky.
Whoever's talking goes on the screen, so hello.
All right, I'm going to turn this over to them, and they can give you a little deeper introduction to kind of their role on the commission and how that progressed forward. We've already given a brief introduction to what was going on, so it's all yours.
Tripp, thank you so much. I'll go ahead and start. Jessica and I kind of flipped, and I won or lost. I'm not sure which yet. But my name is Alice Williams. I'm a member of the laity in the Florida Annual Conference. I don't know who's there from Florida, but whoever it is, hello. Yay! Yay! Is that Sarah? Sarah, is that you? Well, anyway, it's wonderful to be with you, and thank you all so much for allowing us to take up a Friday evening of your time. Let me begin by saying I am laity. Jessica is clergy, and we both were blessed to be able to be a part of this, although I don't think any of us who got on the commission saw it coming. I'll be honest with you. All I ever wanted to do was go to a general conference. It was on my Methodist bucket list. I had no idea it was going to end up being anything like this, but I trusted God to lead as needed, and so that's kind of how this happened for me. And I will tell you that being on the commission, it was one of those experiences where you step into something and you truly are trusting because you have no idea where it's going to lead. There were 32 of us who came from all of the jurisdictions in the Methodist Church, as well as the 5 central conferences. There were 9 nations that were represented. There were 15 states from the United States that were represented. We had 11 laity, 12 clergy, and 9 bishops who made up the 32. So we were, I think I have heard people say we were one of the most diverse committees or church-related kind of work groups that the Methodist Church has had. And I will tell you, too, that the first meeting that we all came together, I think we all walked into the room with a little bit of trepidation because we all came to this work, and I think I'm speaking for everyone when I say this, with a great sense of responsibility to what we were being called to do, and a huge sense of weight on our shoulders because of it. And we also came in knowing that we came from various perspectives that, but that first meeting was a little tense maybe, but it became very clear to us. We had three great moderators in Bishop Steiner Ball, Ken Carter, and Bishop David Yemba, who helped to lead us and kind of put us at ease at the very beginning. We had a wonderful consultant by the name of Gil Rendell from the Texas Methodist Foundation, who helped us to kind of work through how we would put our agendas together for each of the 9 meetings that we had over an 18-month period. And when we came into that first meeting, it was a little tense, but we quickly came to realize that we weren't there to try to change one another's perspectives. It was very clear to us that we weren't going to try to shift people's opinions about LGBTQ inclusion in the church, but that we were there to try to find a way forward, since the name implies the Commission on the Way Forward. And it was out of the impasse that it became evident to us from General Conference 2016 that we needed to find a way to try to find a position that the church could move forward for. As I said, we had 9 meetings over 18 months. And here's kind of a fun fact. We actually came in under budget. Yay for us. Good, right? And the way that happened was because we used a lot of the facilities and the general agencies of the church to meet. So we tried to be very frugal in our approach. And kind of a funny thing about this, our lovely parting gift, we didn't get a t-shirt, but we did get a lovely Cokesbury Bible that everyone signed. So I was very impressed with how well orchestrated the meetings were. I do want to talk just a little bit about the work and how it was assigned and what we were asked to do. The vision for the work was that we wanted to design a way for the Methodist Church to be on mission, and it would maximize where our mission field was so that we were able to reach more people. So we never lost sight of that. We have never lost sight of the calling of the Methodist Church. And I believe that's really, really important. The other thing that we had, that we came to some agreement on, were some key foundational ideas. And the first being that as United Methodists, no matter what comes out of this, there is a common core that we agree to. And that agreement centers around things like the Apostles' and Nicene Creed, the Articles of Religion that we have, the general rules of the church, and the Wesley hymns, and those kinds of things that would make us unique to being Methodist. The second thing that I would say that came out of this that we all agreed to was this notion that we were at an impasse, but that there was a need for us to create space and separation, whatever that's going to look like. We came up with what we think are three options, but that those options, there may be some others that will come forward that maybe changes to those 3, but that those would allow for what I call, my word, space and grace, that we would be able at the special session to find that space and grace that would enable us to be free to be in mission as God calls us as Methodists. And that may mean that the separation is wide, or it may mean that the separation is different, that we allow for people to be in connection in a different way. So don't know what that looks like yet. And by the way, if somebody tells you that they know how this is going to turn out, personally, I don't know how they would know, because I think that it's the good Lord only knows what's going to happen in February. But it remains to be seen what it's going to look like. The other thing that I would say to you is that hopefully you've seen the report and have read through the 92 pages. If you haven't, please do that, because it is important that you become familiar with what we're going to be working on at the special session in February of 2019, but that we recognize that we all come from probably one of 3 areas. One of them might be traditional, where we would adhere to the traditional calling of the church and the current book of discipline language. There are some folks who, words are difficult. We tried to be careful in what we labeled and used words to call things, but it might be either called contextual or it might be considered to call centrist. It's the folks that would kind of say, there's probably room for us to be in disagreement and look at it in different ways. And then the third area is more the progressive, and the progressive would say that we need to have full inclusion. And so we know that the church itself kind of falls into those three buckets, and how large those buckets are, or what that looks like, it's hard to say, but it's like a spectrum, if you will, or a continuum. And so we recognize that the Methodist Church is not of one accord, that we are differing in this. And so the work that was before us was to try to find a way where we can actually, the word that was used a lot was, find unity, but unity may mean different things to different people. And it may mean that we have to think about how large that separation is and what that looks like. So the plans that you saw brought forward were designed to, with the best thinking that we could, getting from other denominations who have walked this journey, from some of the best theologians that we have within the Methodist Church, and then just from the best discernment that we could do and through prayer and study together to try to come up with what we think might be viable options. And so what you're seeing in that report are those viable options that were brought forward. My experience, I just kind of want to lay it out here, is Jessica and I kind of come at it maybe from a different perspective and different angles. What I was so grateful for, though, is that through all of this, we learned to love one another just in the love and grace of Jesus Christ. And I am proud to have served with Jessica on this work and in this work. And there are people who will stay in my life forever, and I think Jessica's one of them. Mas Vida also would be, that was just what happened. It was just one of those things where we bonded in a great way. And I will share with you, for me, it was a little bit daunting. I have worked in the field of human resources for the past 20 years at the Disney company, and I have worked in a lot of diverse areas and that kind of thing, but this was different. This felt very different for me personally. I was one of the 3 LGBTQ members that were on the committee, and I have to be honest with you, I didn't know what to expect. I kind of felt like I was the skunk at the garden party walking into this, but that was not the way I was treated. And so I would say to you that there is, from my perspective, great hope in our church, in that I was given nothing but love and grace throughout this process. And I think that's very important for us to hold on to and to remember. And I think we all walked away feeling that kind of closeness to one another through this work. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jessica. And Jessica, you can go from there.
Thank you. Thanks, Alice. And thank you for getting us started. And I would echo just everything Alice said. It was an amazing experience. It was amazing to meet in a room with this group of people who were literally from all over the world and all loved the same church. And just the different perspectives that came from that and the friendships that came out of that. I mean, I will say, echoing that, Alice is somebody that I want to know for the rest of my life, and just have a deep love there. And one of my favorite memories of Mas Vida, I'll embarrass her since she's in the room with you, is the very first meeting. I don't think she knew how cold it would be in the United States. And so I remember us going shopping and taking her around Marshall's and her buying just layers and layers of clothes and just unable to get warm, not understanding that, was it February or March, that it would be cold in Atlanta where we started out. So, that really endeared her to me. And, I would say as we got started with this commission, part of our task, we were told, was to find a new way of embodying unity We were told we were going to redefine the present connectionality because it was showing signs of brokenness. These are all just quotes from our mission and vision. And then I thought this was really helpful. It was acknowledged that we were doing this work in an atmosphere that already included skepticism and distrust. And just to lay that on the table was very helpful, because I think we all walked into the very first meeting with a great deal of apprehension. I know I did. I will also say, just as we came to that first meeting to begin and get to know each other, not only did I feel apprehension, walking into every one of those meetings, I felt the prayers of the entire church. You just knew that people around the world were praying for you, and that changed things dramatically. So just to give you a little piece of what that looked like, the very first meeting, we arrived, we did not know one another. We arrived at dinner time the night before the first meeting, and we were told just to find a couple of commission members and go out to dinner. And so I was registering and standing next to two other people. And so I just the three of us ended up at dinner together. And so at that table, I looked across the table, and one person had a watch on, and it was a great big Republican National Convention watch. It had a gigantic elephant on it. And the other person was a member of the Queer Clergy Caucus. And I thought, well, this is going to be fascinating. And I've asked different people as I've told that story, this is my very first experience. Here is our dinner party of three, all United Methodists, different parts of the world, different perspectives. I've asked people, how do you think that dinner went? And the answer to that is, it was fantastic. It was a great dinner. And it was just a glimpse into what things would be like. In that, I will say that, while we deeply disagreed with one another, had different perspectives, we agreed in many respects on the fact that our church needs a different kind of future. I had been to 3 general conferences before being part of the commission. And for folks that know what a general conference is like, that causes them quite a bit of reaction and apprehension, because general conferences are very difficult. They are large groups of strangers trying to make decisions together with high levels of anxiety and low levels of relationship and trust. And I mean, the only other place I think, that you get high anxiety and conflict and low trust is like Twitter. I don't know. But, and it's just as messy, general conference can be. And so the commission was really developed to be a room where there would be a high relationship, high trust, in order to deal with high conflict and high anxiety. So while we disagreed with one another, and like Alice said, we're not actually presenting to try to change anyone's mind or advocate for any of the plans tonight. We weren't in the room in order to change each other's minds, and we disagreed deeply. Sometimes it would be fascinating to watch 2 people who disagreed on theology agree on a perspective about, well, this means we need more space within the church. This means that the connectionalism has to be looser. This means that we need to be decentralized in some way, because we can't keep hurting one another like this. We can't keep going on in the process as it is. I'm a clergy person. I'm from the Texas Annual Conference, and I serve in Kentucky, and I work at a seminary here. So my congregation are seminary students. I pastor seminary students. And so a lot of the people that you meet with as boards of ordained ministry or through their psychological evaluations, those are folks that I see every day. And so just a little clue about their perspective on things. They are often in a place of very high anxiety because they're entering this system and they're not sure what will happen. None of us are. None of us know what's about to happen with the church or with the system. They're also very dedicated, motivated, really want to serve, and they don't want to continue a fight that has been continuing for decades. They want to find a place where ministry and mission can be of utmost importance, and where disagreements between people in the church are not the primary. None of us want that to be the primary thing that takes our time or our energy. I tell seminary students there was a day when the United Methodist polity and doctrine class was the most boring class that we took. And that day is over, because polity and doctrine are, in the news right now. That's what we're all talking about is, will our polity and doctrine change? Does it matter? Do we have rules? Do people follow them? Do they matter? And one of the primary answers for that class to one of the questions that you have to know the answer to is, who can speak for the United Methodist Church? And the answer is only the General Conference can speak for the United Methodist Church. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Alice to just introduce maybe where we're headed with. There are 3 plans that the commission developed. We won't go into deep detail about those. I will also say that the General Conference is able to receive legislation from anyone. And so there have been other pieces of legislation. And the 3 documents, I'll let her say more about that.
So yeah, we don't want to get into the plans, but if you haven't had the opportunity to read through them, please do that. Like I said, the reason that I think for you all it's so important is twofold. One, depending on which plan is voted on, if it's one of these 3 or if it's a variation thereof. And I got to be honest with you. I mean, we looked at this for a long time before we came up with the first 2 plans. The traditional plan was always kind of there. It's just been added to, for lack of a better term. So to think that there's a lot of different ways to cut the pie, there's probably not that we could come up with too many more ways to cut the pie, but there may be. And one of the questions that I did see that came through already, I'll just go ahead and answer that. Question is, can someone from the floor bring forward another plan? The answer to that is yes, that can happen from the floor. Let me just kind of talk a little bit about where we are at the moment. So these, the report has been brought forward with the 3 plans in it. There has already been some petitions that have been brought forward to bring to the special session in February, which, by the way, February in St. Louis, I've kind of got this picture in my head that this is basically an adult lock-in that they're doing. 3 days, we will, so you all be thinking about us as we're kind of locked up together. But we will sort through this, these models, and then yes, it can come from the floor. But before that happens, in the wisdom of our moderators, I think it was a right idea. They brought forth to the Council of Bishops to say, listen, we don't want the same thing to happen at the special session that occurred at the General Conference in Tampa in 2012. And I don't know if any of you in the room were there, but basically General Conferences tend to last about 10 days. They got to basically day 10 and had done all of this work. And there were some changes, structural changes to polity and that kind of thing that we're going to go through. And someone raised the issue, well, is this constitutional? You know, we are Methodist, we do have a constitution, so to speak. And all of that work was stopped because it was deemed to be, did not fit within the Constitution of the United Methodist Church. So wisely, they have asked the Judicial Council on the 23rd of this month, as a matter of fact, in Zurich, Switzerland, as part of their docket to review the plans that have been brought forward, and I believe as well the petitions that have been brought forward, and to say, is this within the call of the special session, and is it constitutional? So we're all kind of waiting for that to take place, because that may mean that there would be even more work to be done that may be brought from the floor at the special session, if it were to be that one of the 3 plans or all of the 3 plans were not deemed to fit within the Constitution. One of the other questions that I saw that was kind of related to that was, what percentage of the vote, what majority do we need to have to pass something at the special session? If it is within the call of the special session and it does not change the constitution of the church, it is a simple majority vote. If it is something that is going to change the constitution of the church, it requires a 2/3 majority to pass. So it just depends on what the item is that's being brought forward. Jessica, anything that you would want to add or any thoughts?
I would just say that if a plan has constitutional amendments, as Alice mentioned, that not only does it need 2/3 of the general conference to pass, but then it would go to the annual conferences, and a 2/3 aggregate vote of annual conferences would have to vote to pass it as well. So we've seen constitutional amendments travel around all the annual conferences in the past, but this one would be, we still wouldn't know, because if it passed the general conference by 2/3 within the next year, it would make the rounds of the annual conferences. So that's only for constitutional amendments if the plans have it.
You know, this is so funny. I just can't help but think that John and Charles both are laughing with their OCD kind of approach to how we are as Methodists and whatnot. Because where it has led us to is this place where part of what I love about being Methodist is that we do believe in this methodical approach. Part of what frustrates me most about this is that we are Methodist and we have this methodical approach that just, it has to be followed. So in some ways, it's a double-edged sword for us as a denomination, but yet I think it's an interesting and lovely way for us to be discerning what God's will is. Who at the general, I'm just seeing the questions as they come through. So who is at the general conference? Who gets to vote? So there are 864 delegates, I believe, that'll be there. And for the most part, it will be the same 864 folks who were at the General Conference of 2016 that are coming to the special session. There have been a few annual conferences that have made some votes to make a few changes, and there are some folks who were alternates. I couldn't think of the word alternates because either through sickness or whatever, the actual delegate is not able to be there. So by and large, though, it's the same folks that were in Portland in 2016. Bishops, interestingly enough, and this is kind of part of the democracy of who we are as Methodists, bishops have no vote. They are there to help guide and to oversee the proceedings of the special session and the general conferences, but they do not have a vote in the conferences. So it truly is up to the delegates. Anything do you want to add, Jessica? Or?
Right. I was thinking we would just go roughly through the three plans. Did you?
Okay, if you want to. Yeah.
Okay. So of the three plans that the commission is bringing to the general conference, and they're all being submitted with legislation, so any of them can be voted on. One is a traditionalist plan, and that basically means that the current stance on sexuality in the Book of Discipline would remain the same, but there would be provisions included for accountability, which recognizes that the current Book of Discipline has loopholes that prevent its enforcement. So it would provide accountability for that. So that's one plan. That's the traditionalist plan. One plan is called the Connectional Conference Plan. And in that one, we would remove what now are called jurisdictional conferences, kind of this regional bodies that are throughout the United States, actually, and replace those with connectional conferences. And those would be no longer geographic, but those connectional conferences would be based on affinity around what people believe to be the best practices for the marriage and ordination of LGBTQ persons. So those connectional conferences, then our international body would be able to either affiliate with one of those connectional conferences, or they could become their own connectional conference. And then the One Church plan is the last of the three plans. It takes those decisions that are the difficulties, conflict that we have over the marriage and ordination of LGBTQ persons, and we would no longer make that decision at a general church level, but those decisions would be made at the level of annual conferences, in terms of ordination, and then in terms of LGBTQ marriage, those decisions would be made by local churches in terms of who could be married within their property, and by clergy in terms of what which marriage ceremonies they would feel good about performing. So that is just roughly the three plans. Alice, do you want to? Did I say those right?
Yeah, you did. It was beautiful.
Okay.
And what I would add for this audience is the role of the Board of Ordained Ministries will play a key role, depending, as I said earlier, on which plan or maybe the morph of one of these plans that comes from the floor. Because in some instances, it's actually the Board of Ordained Ministries that may be making the decision as to who gets forgiven. So depending on what the plan looks like, boards of ordained ministry will take a very important role. And I would say to you too, that the notion of ordination and whatnot, again, a lot of that will depend on which plan is given as to what that looks like. In the connectional plan, just kind of backing up a minute, for example, there would be some similar things that we would all adhere to, kind of an umbrella, if you will, probably the articles of religion, some of the Wesleyan types of things. But then underneath that, there may be, different books of discipline for each one of the connections, as well as what the central conferences may or may not choose to do. So the thought of what ordination will look like may in fact be taken on by each one of those bodies that are in there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is change is probably coming in some way, shape, form, or fashion, and booms will probably have a key role in what that change looks like. So just kind of keep that in mind.
I think what Alice just said about change coming is something that really we need to be prepared for. I don't know anyone who thinks that we're just going to skate through this and continue on the way that we have. And I really don't know anyone who wants us to continue the current state of conflict that we're in, and indecision that we're in. And I will just say, just a personal story, that about halfway through this process, I had a mentor that I was trying to process with them and figure out what the best thing was. And this person sat me down and said to me very, very kindly, Jessica, you know that there is no pain-free way forward. And I was shocked a little bit by that, because I think I was trying to find the way to avoid hurting anyone, the way to avoid change, really, because change is painful. And that really helped me understand that we're looking at sort of a period of destabilization of what we've seen in the church. We're in it now. And so coming to a decision, it's going to be painful for a lot of us. Those of you who have as your vocation counseling and helping people emotionally, I would identify that as a church, we are all doing grief work right now. I would say that we're all in various stages of grief, just over the fact of that things will not be what they were, that things are going to change and be different. And so when I encounter people that I'm talking through this process, I encounter some people who are in anger, some who are in denial, some who are in bargaining, some who are in acceptance. It's very interesting to me how much this mirrors the stages of grief. And so as you talk with people who are considering or working towards ordination, they may have all of those emotions or none of them. But we're a family trying to deal with grief together, which as you know, is a difficult thing sometimes because we're in different stages at different times. But I think one of the best things that we can do for one another is to allow one another to process where we are and not expect everyone to be in the same place of acceptance or the same place of fear or anger at the same time.
I'm looking at some of the questions coming through, and so one of them is which of the three will require constitutional changes, which of the three models or plans? And here again, until we know after the 23rd, I don't exactly know how to answer that, because the Judicial Council is going to be looking at what of the plans do touch the Constitution. But what I can tell you is, to the best of our thinking, The traditional and the one church plan do not have constitutional changes, but the connectional model plan does have constitutional changes. But again, that's based on what our thinking was. That is not based on whatever the ruling would be coming from the Judicial Council. See, some of the other, I guess we can kind of morph into the questions, like, if that's all right with everyone.
That's right.
How will the vote take place? We don't know that. Here we are, Methodist again. That is a committee on general conferences that is handling what the logistics and the how the votes will take place. Don't know if there will be multiple votes or only, one or two. I don't know what that looks like. That is up to that committee. So we don't and won't know that as delegates. We won't know that until actually the agenda and the ACDC comes out. The book that has it. I forget what it's called with the book.
The big book.
The big book.
And each of those plans is made up of petitions because they each make changes to the Book of Discipline. So in order to make a change to the Book of Discipline, you have to make a legislative petition, a petition to change wording. And each plan has, one has 17 petitions, one has 14 petitions, and then the last one has 17 as well. So there's a good number of things that have to, they really go together. As Alice mentioned, a typical general conference, a normal general conference lasts up to 10 days. This one will be given 3.5. And so we have a very short time period. And there is legislation that will be submitted that outside of these plans, as is typical of a general conference. United Methodists from around the world have also submitted their thoughts and their plans. And someone asked, can something be presented on the floor? Yes, it can. And things can be amended. Plans can be changed by the floor. So that it really will be in the hands of those 800 plus delegates at that point. The commission itself, we don't get to say, we get to offer suggestions, which we've done. The Council of Bishops gets to preside, but it's the vote of those 800 plus people that will determine. And my estimation is no matter what the vote is, there will be people who are displeased with it. That's always how general conferences work. There's always a segment of people. I don't know that I've ever seen 100% vote at a general conference. So, there will be a percentage of people that disagree. But the way that the Methodist Church is set up, that majority gets to decide, the majority of the general conference.
So one of the questions, and it's a fair one, but one of the questions is, how likely do you think that a 2/3 vote can really occur? If even if on the commission we couldn't come up with one thing that everybody would pass, and so here's the funny thing about all of this. The thing that I am reminded of is God before us, God with us, God ahead of us. I don't worry about whether we'll get the 2/3 vote or if we are doing the right thing and discerning God's will, that will come. That will take care of itself. But now I follow that with, and please take this in the way that it was intended. My pastor has often said to me, Alice, you eat Skittles and poop rainbows. And that's true. I'm an optimist by nature. So I am optimistic that, that we will come to some agreement. I have no idea what it is, but that will happen. But that's my belief. That's my assurance. So Jessica, I don't know if you want to say anything to that or not.
I have no Skittles.
Yeah.
But I would say though that I think change has been coming for a while for the church, and like I said, people are not in favor of continuing the present state of conflict, and so I'm hopeful that we're reaching a point where ministry and mission will be the focus and not conflict with one another. We're at about, Alice, we're at a little over 30 minutes for the presentation. So I just want to ask Tripp or somebody in the room if we want to continue with questions, how gauge the interest of the room.
Yeah. How are we doing?
Yeah. Do you guys want to keep going for just a little bit? or not? I guess raise your hand if you want to keep going, because right now nobody's doing anything. How many of you are ready to bail? Okay. All right, it's about
Oh, that
three-fourths.
wasn't me. I mean, I'm happy. but
Three-fourths have had a really long day, and a quarter are still floating on a caffeine high. What? Yeah, the report that Alice had mentioned earlier is posted on the event website. And yeah, the legislation and everything are there for you to go peruse. And Megan mentioned November 25th, the advanced DCA is coming out, and they'll have anything that people have submitted ahead of time to also be considered. But like they had mentioned, stuff can come up on the floor as well, and that also changes the conversation. Do you have anything to add, Stephen? Okay. I got the palm, so I guess that means. Yeah.
One thing, Trip.
Yes.
Just one thing I do want to make sure you all can plug into. We are doing daily at 2:23 to 2:26 from now until February 23rd through 26th. A moment of prayer around the special session. So would invite all of you to please join in that. If you set your phone or whatever for 2:23 to 2:26, that's a time that we're trying to ask everyone to just be in prayer about our church and the discernment for the delegates and that kind of thing.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. No, that prayer is a powerful thing. I've used something like that in churches before, when we've all tried to discern something together. And in Acts, it says, the whole church came together in one place and prayed, and the Spirit moved in powerful ways. So take that suggestion seriously and think about praying at 2:23 every day, because it can be a very powerful thing and a unifying thing. Are there any other questions that are just burning on your soul you have to ask?
Please, no.
Okay, great. Yes, absolutely. Alice, did you hear that? Jessica? They wanted to say thank you.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
big time. Thank you all.
Right. Anything else? All right. Go in peace. Have a good evening. We'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Alice, Jessica, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.